The first memory I have, I was probably about 4 or 5 years old. We had a wood burning fireplace. Uh, Actually, it was a cook stove in the house where I lived. And I remember sitting behind it to keep warm because that was one of our forms of major heat. I remember sitting behind it holding my kitty cat. And then I remember the next thing is my oldest sister, Margie. We were walking out in the woods close to the house, the farm where I lived, and we found a little wooden wagon sitting out among the trees. And my sister put me in the wagon and pulled me home. And then it was just one happy family, me and my sisters and mother and daddy. And the next thing that I recall vividly is my first day at school. I was real small for my age, and somehow the friend that rode on the school bus with me, we got first in the line. And when the principal asked us to form a line and move to follow him, well, we started, but we started too soon, so they took us and put us in the back of the line. So I ended up at the end of the line rather than the first of the line. I remember my first grade vividly, and my second grade. All through school, I went through all 12 grades of my school with the same classmates. We didn't switch from high school to grade school and all of that. I went through all 12 grades with the same set of friends and the same set of classmates. During my senior year, most of the boys in my class, as soon as we graduated, were drafted into the armed services, and a good portion of them did not return after the war. They were killed or injured. But probably when I was in the 9th or 10th grade, they had a music concert, sort of a competition, and it was the whole county. In Louisiana, it was parishes. We competed against each other on the stage, and my sisters had spent weeks making me a special dress. It was pink and lace and lots of ruffles. But anyway, I won 3rd place, and oh, I was so happy. I think maybe I got $1 or something like that as a prize. And I would get off of the school bus, and sometimes the school bus, the water would be up. In Louisiana, if there was a lot of rain and snow up north, the floods would come into Louisiana and it would settle in the part where I lived. Sometimes the school bus couldn't get to my house to pick me up, so the group of us that lived in that area would take a boat and go to the higher land where we could get on the school bus. When we got off the school bus, we'd get back on the boat and bring us home to our homes. But I was old enough to remember when my father and mother and I, the only ones left at home, had to forsake our home and pack up all the chickens and cows and pigs and everything that we had in a wagon and move it out to higher ground. We lived in a tent until the water started receding, and we received government rations. It would be blocks of cheese and prunes and whatever it was that the federal government was giving away to people who had to move out of their homes. I had a fun time because we were all living close, and some of my friends and those kids just had a party all the time, where the older folks were sweating how to make a living when they got back into their homes. When we went back to ours, the water had been up 5 or 6 feet into our house, so we had to clean all that up. But one of the times I was on the wagon with my father when we were moving out the load of chickens. We probably had maybe 50 or 60 chickens, and somehow the water was up to the bottom of the wagon, and one of the horses got spooked and turned the wagon over in the water, and my poor father got out and straightened up the wagon by himself, got the horses calmed down, and we got out safely with the chickens. It was a struggle with my parents living on the farm because it was hard work, and my father just had daughters, no sons. And I have the vivid picture of him working so hard with a horse, plowing the ground and getting the crops ready, and then harvesting all the food for the winter. He would bring in corn and peanuts, and my mother would be out in the garden gathering vegetables and all the fruit and everything that we could can to have for the winter months. And my father would slaughter a pig, and he built a house called the smokehouse, and he would put a fire in the bottom of the smokehouse and keep a fire going low all the time to smoke the meat, so we'd have ham and bacon and smoked meat all the time. But when we would slaughter a pig or a cow, all the neighbors would come, and we would share it all with the neighbors. We had a wonderful set of neighbors. We were all friends, and we knew when they were sick and when we were sick. And my best friends lived across the bayou from where I lived, and they had a large family, like 10 children. But 2 of the sisters were my best friends. Sarah and Elizabeth were their names, and they spent the night over at my house a lot. And I would go over to their house and spend the night. And with all those children and me being an only child at home, it was such great fun. And sometime I'd go to eat over at their house, and we would maybe have biscuits and syrup and butter for dinner, but to me that was really a feast. And I would sleep with both of them in the bed and play with their little brothers and sisters because I didn't have any. But at Christmas, maybe I would get a ball and maybe a doll if I was lucky and the year had been good. But my father didn't own a car, and he would get a ride or walk into town, which was probably 10 or 15 miles, carry a sack, and he would bring home special things for Christmas like raisins and all kinds of sugars and things to make pies and cakes. And we weren't accustomed to having that all the time. And so that was a real treat at Christmas. We'd have special food for a long time after my daddy went to town and came back. And our candy was made with the syrup that my father made off of the sugar cane that he grew. And my mother made what she called tea cakes, and it was made with the molasses that my father made off of the sugar cane he grew. I grew up in a home with nothing but love. I never saw my parents have an argument. In the house, there were 2 large beds in one bedroom with a fireplace, and then the other side of the house was a fireplace with 2 big rooms where my sisters slept. But I would sleep in one of the beds, and my mother and father would sleep in the other bed. And we didn't have electricity. I would read and study by the fireplace light. And when I came home from school on cold days, my father would have a cup of hot chocolate made for me when I came home from school. And they were very interested in my schoolwork, and I would read to them, and I would read out the Bible to them.